Hey everybody, it's me, Mr. Green. So out of nowhere, Sunrise, one of the best anime series in Japan, posted a weird video called Aura Battler Dunbine Side L the other day. Now this video is unusual because essentially this is an untested proof of concept for maybe a new anime, or theoretically more precisely, it's an unconfirmed HD remake of the classic 1983 anime Aura Battler Dunbine. Now, if some of you guys have never heard of the show before, to sum it up as quickly as possible, do you guys know Middle-earth, the place from the Lord of the Rings movies? Well, this anime posits that that is a literal real place, and that literally exists slightly below the surface of the Earth. And everything was all good and fine there until one day, literally Bill Gates went down there from California, invented the computer there, and with computers in Middle-earth, the people of Bisonwell, a country inside of Middle-earth, were able to zombie up a bunch of dead giant bug shells and turn them into half-assed cyborg mecha called Aura Battlers. Now, eventually, a Japanese random motocross dude named Shozama goes down there to try and stop them. He teams up with a bunch of very mystical Irish people and this chick from Dallas, Texas, and ultra-violence ensues. Now, this was a mock-up of an HD remake of this anime made by the studio Kamikaze Doga. The studio is most famous for making the openings to all the seasons of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and they've done some other anime openings and endings I'm not really familiar with, but the only thing they've ever done before that would qualify as a full anime was the Batman Ninja anime, that movie where Batman was a ninja. Anyway, I guess they're trying to see what they can do and drum up some work. So they made this mock-up. This mock-up consists of a redone opening, a redone ending, and a redone clip of the battle against Galeria from episode 16, which personally I think might have been one of the best battles in the entire show. So good choice. Definitely one of the most memorable battles. Definitely one of my favorite battles. Really good choice there. Now the ending is also significantly edited, and the original Dunbine is kind of famous for having one of the worst endings in anime history because it's literally just a walk cycle of a fairy girl dancing on flower petals. They seem to have livened it up quite a little bit with some more stock footage. Now, I know Dunbine is not everyone's personal favorite cup of tea, but I personally regard it quite highly. I think it's Yoshiyuki Tomino at the peak of his career. It's literally the first isekai anime, and quite frankly, if you've ever enjoyed any of the 400 isekai anime that came after this one, you owe this one. This is like the grandfather of all isekai anime. There's literally no other anime that also uses Irish mythology as part of its backstory, or the works of Tolkien, because that's legally dangerous and in the 80s they didn't give a fuck. And it tells a really entertaining story about how technology can fuck up a magical religious place. Now, legendarily, when this anime was first translated for the US, it was released in the early 2000s by ADV, and ADV famously did not print enough copies of the last episode. So for about 20 years after that, the last episode of the show spiked in value till it eventually reached a maximum of about $800, until the show was eventually re-released on Blu-ray a few years back, and now no one really cares because you can just buy the whole show all at once. But anyway, so here we are, an HD remake of an anime. That's weird, right? Because what they've essentially done is they've given this anime the Super Mario Bros. All-Stars treatment. They've replaced the original beautiful hand-drawn robot fights with some okay-ish 3D animated models. They also seem to have completely redrawn all the original animation in 16:9 with better shading and coloring, and I love that. I love that they've just expanded the frames from the 4:3 versions, so now you can see a little bit more of what's going on, and that overall gives me a really interesting feeling. You can really tell, when you do a side-by-side to the original, that now you can see the side mirrors in the Dunbine cockpit, and you can just see a little bit more of the frame. So that I think is cool. But overall, I also kind of have mixed feelings about this because I'm not sure if I love the use of CGI in this. The CGI is kind of all over the place, and I know that's definitely Kamikaze's thing, but at the same time, as much as I love the redrawn, hand-drawn animation in parts, the seaweed here looks beautiful, this transition in space looks beautiful, this alone looks so much better than the original. My real only regret here is I kind of wish the entire show could be redrawn by hand, because hand-drawn mecha shows are kind of slowly fading out of style, and the more I think about it, I think the main issue I have with this is the Aura Battler 3D machines. They just don't look like they're shaded the same way as everything else, which is in more of an anime style. The Aura machines look like they're trying to shade them realistically. I think I would be more on board if they were like cell shaded and they look closer to the animation. Anyway, someone did a side-by-side, and let me look over these carefully, because on the side-by-side, I feel like I can get like a much different vibe for like how this is playing out. So yeah, just like glancing over the side-by-sides, I think I've got kind of mixed feelings about like the way the Dunbine looks at the opening. I feel like the shading was a little bit more expressive when it was hand-drawn, and then the part where the Dunbine flies into the air gate, that doesn't really make any sense, but at least in like the hand-drawn version, it was shaded a little bit better, and you also lose all these like details of like the wind streaks and the sparkles coming out of the Dunbine, so I feel like that's a little bit of a downgrade. On the next batch of shots, I don't have like any serious feelings too much on it, but I do feel like the remake of Dunbine is overly using these random like world shots of like their super hyper realistic trees, whereas like in the original anime it was more like expressive colors and like hand painted backgrounds. Like comparing like the CGI effect to like this like beautiful hand drawn like animated painting, like I kind of want to go with the painting. Going on to the next batch, I will say that the new HD'd up cockpit looks a lot better, especially because it looks like they drew more details into it. I've kind of got really mixed feelings on this shot of the Dunbine standing on the dock of the ship. So what throws me about this one is that in the original anime, the world was more stylized and it looked to be like pre-dawn, whereas like in the new version, you can see the sun is clearly rising, but then the world has lost all that curvature, so that's not cool. And then the bottom two shots, I like both of these shots. These shots both look better, but again, overusing the forest BG instead of the detailed painted BGs is changing my feelings. But then like, I also appreciate that I can see a little bit more of the cockpit, so that's kind of cool. Moving on to the next batch. Yeah, same. Again, they've replaced beautiful hand-drawn Sakuga areas with just like more trees, which I'm not really feeling. The leprechaun at the top does look kind of cool. That I feel is a pure upgrade, just on the side-by-side. Next batch. Now this batch I think shows like the most corruption from the original to the CGI version, because these are all CGI shots of the Bilbine, and just looking at them side by side like this, you can see that the original hand-drawn shots of the Bilbine actually have more detail in them. Like look, there's more like wood chips when the Bilbine is flying out of the ground. There's more lines when it's using its sword. So even though the CGI model of the Bilbine looks a little bit cleaner, I would say overall it just doesn't have the same expressionness of the original. Like look at this dull night shot of the Bilbine holding up its gun compared to the 80s style one where it's like over like a gradient of like blood behind it. That like has a completely different feeling to me. Even if the Bilbine is shaded better in the upgrade, not having the background the same really throws it off for me. Then the next couple of shots are a lot more closer, so I feel good about this batch. I'm going to say this batch is completely fine to me. Going to the last batch, which is just like the Dunbine fighting. Yeah, similar. I'd say this is a good effort, and I guess... Oh, actually, at the top, it's not even the same robot he's fighting, so that's completely wrong. What's up with that? But yeah, overall, the fact the background is now, I guess, a more realistic background instead of the very specific painting that it originally was, I feel like that's like throwing things off a lot for me. So yeah, like overall, like I've got some like weird feelings about this. I think the idea is good, but I also kind of hope that they would get the backgrounds and the other details a little bit closer. But then again, it doesn't seem like they're even capable of doing that, so maybe it's not worth doing at all. This technically isn't the first time Sunrise has done this either, because both Gundam Seed and Seed Destiny were remastered for HD and had their 4x3 art extended to 16:9. But in that case, that show had just come out, so it wasn't that big of a deal to re-edit them like that. Whereas this show is like over 40 years old, so it's more of a big deal. I'm overall kind of for this because I will say that it will probably help the old anime reach like a new audience, which was kind of like the big deal of like the Disney Star Wars thing, but I'm hoping it's not like the Disney Star Wars thing where like after they edited them, the original versions became prohibited and the HD remakes became the only version you can get. I also kind of hope that they could remarry the new HD version with the old ADV dub, because I've got a lot of like fond memories of that dub. I think it was kind of an awesome dub. Anyway, I'm also kind of besides myself at why did they start with Dunbine? I mean, I get Dunbine is sort of still popular in Japan and all, but I feel like there were so many other anime that kind of need this more than Dunbine, because Dunbine already looks pretty decent. Like if I had to like name some anime that could really use this treatment, I would have to pick like a majority of Sunrise's 1970s backlog, like shows like the original Gundam or Daitarn or Zambot 3, and definitely Space Runway Ideon. Ideon is such an underappreciated classic, and that could really use a new coat of paint. But who knows if they'll actually spend the money to redo all this old anime like this. But anyway, I think this is pretty nuts, and it's great seeing Sham in animation again after all these years. But what do you think? Would you guys be down for HD remakes of old animes from the 80s and 70s like this? Let me know in the comments. Bye!